Sefer Achinuch, when discussing the mitzvah of the Korban Pesach, the Sefer Achinuch uses an expression that Adam nifal al pi pe'ulosav. A person is affected based on his actions. Now, Sefer Achinuch says this in the context of the Korban Pesach and the entire procedure, all with the mitzvahs that we go through on Pesach. Here we are with matzah and moror and charoses and cleaning the house and all the various mitzvahs. And in connection to this, the Sefer Achinuch points out the idea that a person is affected by the actions that he takes. Now, the truth of the matter is, there are a lot of mitzvahs when it comes to Pesach. One of the mitzvahs, by the way, is not to get impatient and upset at home when your kids track crackers all over the place. But there are other mitzvahs by the Korban Pesach, among which are the way we eat the Korban Pesach and the various halachas, which we'll speak about in a little while. But this is not only limited to Pesach. This goes on in the course of the entire Jewish year. In the course of the Jewish year, we got a lot of mitzvahs that we're involved with. There are all sorts of mitzvahs that we're doing on a regular basis, whether it's a woman lighting candles and whether it's a man putting on tefillin. There are many, many different mitzvahs that we're doing in the course of the year. And the underlying idea, one of the underlying ideas, is again this idea of Adam nifal al pi pe'ulosav, that by doing and actively participating in the mitzvahs, it has some sort of effect on us. We ourselves are affected by the fact that we participate in doing the mitzvahs. Probably a classic example is the idea of going to shul. Men go to shul, men have to daven a minyan 3 times a day. Women daven also. But men have to daven in shul. Now, we go to shul and we think of shul in terms of, I got to go daven, I got to catch a mincha, catch a ma'ariv, and that's all true. And obviously we're speaking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and asking for what we need and so on. But a person also has to realize that Adam nifal al pi pe'ulosav, that man is affected by his actions. From man who goes to shul 3 times a day, and sometimes even makes it on time, you have to understand that that itself becomes a discipline for a person. In other words, because I'm conscious of my obligation to go to shul, and because I get up in the morning thinking, where am I going to catch a shachris, and I've got to be there at a certain time, and I got to say Kriyash at a certain time, that has an effect on me as a person. Me personally, I hope, but certainly the me of every Jew in Klal Yisrael. And beside the actual davening in shul, there's the effect of I'm now a more disciplined person. It's a certain discipline to get to shul. There's a certain discipline in having to wash our hands before we eat. Because on the one hand, we have to wash our hands before we eat bread, but it's also a discipline that when a person is hungry, they can't just open the fridge with their leg and grab a hunk of salami or a hunk of bread and start biting. We have to do it in a more controlled manner. So that means that we are being affected, what I call spiritual practice. There was a famous golfer who once said, the more I practice, the luckier I get. And that's a profound line, because the more one practices, so then those things which could go either way, because he's practiced so much, so he gets the drop where others think it's luck, but it's really a result of the practice. The more he practiced, the closer he got to the hole, so they think it's luck. But he knows that it's the result of what he invested in it. This is what I refer to as spiritual practice. Mitzvahs we have to do because they're mitzvahs. But it becomes a training for us. By doing the mitzvahs, it has an effect on us. That's the underlying idea. That's what's happening when it comes to the Korban Pesach, the Paschal lamb, the Pesach sacrifice, and when it comes to the other mitzvahs that Pesach involve. Now, one of the stranger mitzvahs, I don't know if the word strange is correct, but I'd say it's certainly something that we find a bit puzzling, is when we're sitting at the Pesach Seder, we have a mitzvah called korech. Now, for those who are Ashkenazi and use hard matzahs, especially if you're using hand matzahs, but even if you use a machine matzah, so you take a piece of romaine lettuce and you put it between 2 pieces of hard matzah. This is after we've already eaten matzah and maror. And then you try to negotiate this thing into your mouth, and half of it ends up in your pants, and you're wondering, what kind of combination of a sandwich is this? Who thought of putting lettuce on matzah, which is really not a very efficient combination when it comes to a sandwich? And the answer is that we have to understand what matzah originally looked like. Now, this korech, we say in the Haggadah that this was a minhag instituted by Hillel. Hillel was a Bavli. Hillel HaBavli. He came from Babylonia. And the matzah in many of the Eastern communities is a soft, pliable matzah. We, the Ashkenazim, make sure that it's hard because of certain halachic concerns, but there are still to this day those who eat soft, pliable matzah. Now, if you take the soft, pliable matzah and you put some lettuce in there, and you then put some roast lamb in there, and you wrap it up, that's korech. It's a rek. Korech means to wrap. Korech does not mean to make a sandwich. It means to wrap, and that's exactly what they did. They wrapped roast lamb with lettuce. Listen, I could get used to that. That's a little better. That's certainly a little better than hard matzah with just one piece of lettuce, especially if you after eaten matzah and maror already. So the korech is really a commemoration of what the Korban Pesach originally was. That the Korban Pesach, which was roast lamb, and they ate it on the night of Pesach, that was korech. Now, I want to go into this a little bit because I think it's something that people forget. That Pesach, people talk about the Seder, and people about the cleaning, and people talk about the selling the chametz. And I always recommend for parents, by the way, if you can't sell your chametz, just sell your children for 7 days. That's more efficient. But so far that has not been ratified rabbinically. But if a person understands that this whole thing called Pesach, there was a Korban Pesach, there was a Pesach sacrifice which took place in Egypt, in Mitzrayim. Now, what was the idea of the Korban Pesach? I want to present two ideas over here. The Jewish people, the night that they're sitting around their tables and they are going to eat the Korban Pesach, that was the night that the Egyptian firstborns died. Now, there are two very interesting halachas according to this approach. Number one, they're told that they have to eat the Korban Pesach, they have to roast the sheep, the seh, and they have to roast it whole. Now, what is the idea behind that for the Jews who were in Egypt? And the Mefarshim explain the Egyptians worshipped the sheep was the Egyptian god. According to some, it corresponds to the constellation, to the zodiac sign Aries, which is the ram. And so they worshipped the sheep. Now imagine two Egyptians are walking on the street, and all of a sudden they hear screaming and yelling, because from every house, ein bayis asher ein shames, every Egyptian house, somebody was dying. So these guys go running to go see what's happening in their own house, and on the way, all of a sudden they smell a mysterious roasting meat smell. Now, they nervous because this smells like their deity is being roasted. Hey, that sounds like roast lamb. So they go over to the nearest Jewish house, and one of them, he says, Anwar, give me a boost over here. And Anwar bends down, and Ahmed stands on his shoulders, and he looks into the house, and they very unmistakably sees, ironically, the halacha is that it has to be roasted whole. Had it been chopped up in pieces, maybe they would have thought it's a turkey. But they see there is their deity being roasted whole, which is something that will then discourage the Egyptians while their firstborns are dying. And it is also serves as a reminder to the Jewish people who were involved in the various forms of Egyptian idol worship, that there is absolutely nothing to the Egyptian deity at all. And therefore, idea number one is that the roasted lamb, which at the time of the Beis Hamikdash, they was put in the korech wrap, that roasted lamb, which is the Korban Pesach, represents the devastation felt by the Egyptians when they understand that their deity is slaughtered and on a spit, and it's spinning softly in a fire, which the Jews are then going to consume. That's idea number one. Idea number two is that there are certain halachas involving the Korban Pesach, and these halachas are that it has to be roasted, as we mentioned. It also, the Jews were not, the Bnei Yisrael are not allowed to break any bones in the Korban Pesach when they ate it. Number three, there has to be pre-designated. You have to be designated as a member of the chabura, the group that's going to consume the Korban Pesach. If you're not pre-designated, you are not allowed to participate in the consumption of the Korban Pesach. Number 4, anything left over during that night when they were eating the Korban Pesach, anything left over has to be burnt the next day. And number 5, no part of the Korban Pesach may be taken out of the dwelling area where they were eating it. Those are the 5 halachas surrounding the Korban Pesach. And what is the significance of these halachas? So we have to always go back to a principle. If the Torah says don't do something, we always have to ask ourselves why we would do it. You'll notice the Torah never says don't take a chair and slam it against the wall 27 times, because very few people are tempted to take a chair and slam it against the wall 27 times. But the Torah says don't eat pork, because people are tempted to eat pork. Here, the Torah says, number 1, it has to be roasted. Now, why do we have to be roast meat? The answer is that the night of Pesach, when we're at the Seder, we are meant to be certainly acting as aristocrats. We are free people. We've been freed from bondage, and therefore we are aristocrats. Well, if you have meat and you want the meat to taste good, do you cook it or do you roast it? You know, when you walk past the backyard where somebody's having a barbecue, you smell it down the block and your first thought is, how come I'm not invited? So roast meat tastes better than cooked meat, number 1. And aristocrats eat roast meat, number 1. Number 2, if you're on a budget and you want the meat to go long, you cook it, because then it expands. When you roast it, the meat shrivels up. Aristocrats are not on a budget, and therefore the roast meat is a reminder to us when we eat the Korban Pesach, A, that we are aristocrats, B, we are not to break any bones. Now, why, if the Torah says don't break bones, we have to ask ourselves why we would break bones. And the answer is, one breaks bones when one is in a hurry. If you're in a hurry, you kind of quickly chop through and eat as fast as you can. The definition of freedom is that your time is your own. That's the definition of freedom. As soon as your time does not belong to yourself, for example, as soon as you walk away from the chuppah when you're married, your time is no longer your own. You cannot make any independent plans. As one young man told me when I asked him what he's learned after 3 weeks of marriage, he said, don't make any independent plans. So your time is your own. If you're breaking bones and you've got all the time in the world, then I'm not in a hurry. I'm not going to break any bones. And that is symbolic of being a free man and an aristocrat. Therefore, we're not allowed to break bones in the Korban Pesach. Number 3 is that you have to be pre-designated. Pre-designated means invitation only. That's how aristocrats go to weddings. Some people, if you live in Israel, sometimes you get a wedding invitation, there are 3 halls in one building, and you may end up going to all 3 of them and just dropping in. Why not? Well, here it's pre-designated, because aristocrats have to be a fancy invitation, gold embossed, and they walk in, they got a little card that says what table you sit at. That's the symbol of aristocracy. Number 4 is that the leftovers have to be burnt. Quite simply, aristocrats don't eat leftovers. Neither do many husbands, by the way. I told my wife that when we got married, I don't do leftovers. And she said to me, well, what do we do with them? I said, give it, a lot of people used to hear from your mother, it tastes just like fresh. Well, we all know it doesn't. So I told my wife, if it tastes like fresh, give it to the kids, and I'll eat the real fresh stuff, because that certainly tastes fresh. So aristocrats don't eat leftovers. I don't eat leftovers. I'm not an aristocrat, but at least that much I have in common with them. And number 5 is that you are not allowed to take the meat out of the area that you're eating it. Now, again, if the Torah says don't take the meat out, why would you want to take it out? When's the last time you ran out of your house with your chicken on a Friday night and ran out of the house with a polky? So why does the Torah have to tell you don't take it out? The answer is that, you ever see people go to a Chinese restaurant. So whenever you're sitting in a Chinese restaurant, you get 4 people sitting around the table, and everybody's got their hand in somebody else's plate. Oh, could I taste that? What is that? Well, I've got some yellow wonton MSG laden type of thing. And what have you got? I've got some green wonton MSG laden thing. And it's a very big novelty. And when it's a novelty, people are excited, so people are constantly looking what everybody else has got. If you ever walk into a standard Jewish restaurant, there are no novelties there. There's some roast chicken, cholent, and some kugel. There's no novelty. Nobody gets excited. when you're doing something that's off the beaten path, then everybody gets excited. Could you imagine a Jew? We were a slave. All of a sudden, they were eating fish in Mitzrayim or whatever the lousy food that they had to eat all those years. All of a sudden, roast lamb. Could you imagine one of the Jews taking it, running out, "Hey, Moshe, we got some roast lamb in our house"? The Torah says that's not aristocratic behavior. We are aristocrats. Do not take any of the food out of that location. The bottom line is that eating the Korban Pesach is a reminder to us that we are aristocrats. The night of Pesach, we're aristocrats. So we have two approaches here. There's the approach of what it does to the Egyptians, the reminder of the devastation of their deity, and there's the reminder of what it does to us as Klal Yisrael to remind us that on the night of Pesach, we are aristocrats. But it doesn't stop with Pesach. Pesach extends through the rest of the year. And it's a reminder to us that our actions all year should reflect the aristocracy of Torah, the aristocracy of Torah Jews. I wish everybody a Chag Kosher v'Somayach. I can't tell you to enjoy the roast lamb this year, but you never know. Maybe by then, we will all be sitting and having a korech, which wraps the lettuce along with the roast lamb and a soft matzah, a Chag Kosher v'Somayach.
Hi, this is Peretz Baruch Eichler, a proud alumnus of Ohr Somayach. Now, what you just watched is one of the many programs that Ohr Somayach provides, leaving its impact on hundreds of thousands with so many more waiting to be reached. Ohr Somayach's central campus in Jerusalem has over 300 students presently learning there. And now you can be a vital part of spreading that bounty of knowledge worldwide by logging on to donate.ohr.edu. We can step up to the plate at this pivotal moment of Ohr Somayach's growth and bring the next generation of Jews home.